You ever ask your AI assistant a question that feels pretty simple, but the answer you get back is just completely wrong? Yeah, it's a super common frustration. And it usually happens when your question needs the AI to connect a few different dots. Well, today, we're going to dive into a brand new framework called HANRAG, and it's designed to teach AI how to solve exactly those kinds of tricky, multi-step problems. So, to see what I mean, check this out. Who is a father-in-law of Queen Hyojung? Now, to answer this, an AI can't just look up one fact. First, it's got to figure out who Queen Hyojung's husband was, and that's Hyunjung of Joseon. Okay, step one. Then it has to do a second search to find out who his father was, which was Crown Prince Hyomyong. This is a perfect example of what's called a multi-hop question, and it's exactly where today's AI systems so often fall flat. And that little two-step process, right there, it actually reveals a huge blind spot in even the most powerful AIs out there. I mean, they're incredible at pulling up a single fact, but they really, really struggle with questions that need that kind of chain of reasoning. Okay, so the standard tech that AI uses to look things up is called RAG, or Retrieval-Augmented Generation. The easiest way to think about it is like giving the AI a library card. So instead of only using the information it was trained on, which, can get outdated, it can actually go out and retrieve fresh, relevant facts from somewhere else to build its answer. And for basic questions, it's a brilliant solution. But here's the catch. The second a question involves more than one hop of information, that simple library card system just isn't enough. Standard RAG gets lost, it gets confused, and way too often it comes back with a jumbled or just plain wrong answer. And this brings us to what researchers call the multi-hop challenge. So what's really going wrong under the hood? Let's break down the specific things that make these systems fail. The research paper actually points to three main villains that totally derail the whole process. First, you've got excessive iteration. This is where the AI just wastes time looking up the same info over and over. Then there's irrational querying, where it just keeps using the original kind of vague question for every single search instead of getting smarter with each step. And then, the big one, noise accumulation. With every search, useless, irrelevant documents start to pile up, creating this mountain of noise that just completely confuses the AI in the end. Now, what's really fascinating is that not all these tricky questions are built the same way. A compound query is basically asking for a few separate facts about one thing, right? Like, when was Michael Phelps born and when did he retire? You can look those up at the same time, in parallel. But a complex query? Well, that's a true chain of logic. You absolutely need the answer to part one before you can even ask part two. And that distinction, it's absolutely crucial. So, to take down those villains and master both types of questions, researchers have come up with a new hero for our story. Let's meet HANRAG. HANRAG stands for Heuristic, Accurate, and Noise-Resistant RAG. So what does that all mean? Well, heuristic means it's built with smart rules of thumb to guide the process. Accurate, that's pretty obvious, it gets the right answer more often. And noise-resistant, that means it's specifically designed to fight that problem of junk information that confuses the final result. Now, the secret sauce behind HANRAG is this central command unit. Think of it like a project manager for answering your questions. The paper calls it a master agent. And this master agent has a pretty cool name, the revelator. Just like the paper says, it orchestrates the process. So you can think of it like the conductor of an orchestra, but for information, making sure every single step is precise and perfectly in harmony. So here's how the revelator actually works. It follows this really smart four-step process. First, it routes the query, figuring out if it's simple, compound, or complex. Next, it decomposes or refines the question into smaller, more manageable pieces. Third, and this is the absolute key, it filters out the noise. It just throws away all the irrelevant junk. And finally, it guides the AI by feeding it only the clean, verified information it needs to generate the final answer. You can see how this directly takes on those three villains we talked about. Okay, a great theory is one thing, but the real question is, does it actually work in the real world? Well, the researchers put HANRAG through a whole bunch of really tough tests to find out. And the results are, well, they're pretty impressive. On a really difficult data set for these complex questions, a competing method called adaptive RAG scored around 46% accuracy. HANRAG, on the other hand, hit nearly 61%. That is a massive improvement. It shows it can navigate those tricky logical chains way more effectively. And it's not just more accurate. It's also way more efficient. For those compound queries, HANRAG needed almost 1.5 fewer retrieval steps than its competitor. That means it gets to the answer faster and with a lot less wasted energy, all because its revelator is smart enough to know it can search for the answers in parallel. This table really drives the point home. I mean, look at this. Across 3 completely different benchmarks for complex questions, Musique, Hotpot QA, and 2Wiki Multihop QA, HANRAG just consistently blows the competition out of the water. Look at those accuracy improvements, over 17%, almost 17%, over 14% better. This isn't a fluke. It's just a fundamentally better way of doing things. So what's the bottom line here? Why does it work so well? It all comes back to the revelator's incredible ability to act as a world-class filter. By spotting and just tossing out that irrelevant, noisy information at every single step of the process, it keeps the AI from getting sidetracked. It keeps the whole reasoning process clean and on track. All of this really points to a pretty fascinating future for how we're all going to interact with AI. So what does a system like HANRAG really mean for us? While the researchers themselves conclude that HANRAG has established itself as the new state-of-the-art, or SOTA, approach. And that's a big deal. This isn't just a small improvement. It's the new gold standard for how to build an AI that can actually reason. And why this all matters is actually pretty simple. This goes way beyond just winning some AI competition. It's about creating assistants that don't just spit facts back at you, but can genuinely help us solve complex problems. Whether that's a scientist trying to connect different data points, or a doctor trying to diagnose a rare disease, or hey, even just you trying to figure out a tricky historical question. Frameworks like HANRAG are a huge leap forward in an AI's ability to think, to reason. And it really makes you wonder, with this kind of step-by-step thinking, how long is it going to be until we have an AI that can reliably answer almost any question we can come up with, no matter how many crazy hops it takes to get there?